My hope is that you haven't become weary of this series in Acts chapter 10, that you've taken the time to dig in deeper with me on what God's trying to tell us here. The title today is Everyone's Invited. Are you ready for more? Because if we're ready for more, we have to understand and accept that everyone's invited. Specifically today, we'll be focusing on Acts chapter 10, verse 43. Let me just read that for you real quick. All the prophets testify about him, that everyone who believes in him receives forgiveness of sins through his name. I feel the need to just remind you that this story wraps around Peter. Peter, who Jesus called the rock. Peter, who denied Christ. Peter, who was supposed to start a church. And when Peter writes this story of his encounter with Cornelius, we have to remind ourselves that Peter was a Jew, and he wasn't supposed to spend time with a Gentile. Peter did not want, in his flesh, he did not want the Gentiles to accept Christ. Because he had spent his entire childhood, his entire livelihood was for the Jews to be elevated. They were special. They were anointed. They were called. They were God's chosen people. And Peter was a Jew. He had it under control. He had it on lockdown. No reason to worry about what God was going to do with his life, because he was a Jew who was chosen by Jesus. I mean, it really doesn't get much better than that. For Peter, that's it. He's got the whole deal. After Jesus had risen from the grave, and Peter had an opportunity to not just to hear the teachings of Jesus, but to see the reality. And let me stop right there, because I got to make this really clear at this point. See, there's many religious leaders, and we all have heard different ones, and you're familiar with some, and maybe not as familiar with others. But let me just throw this out there for you to contemplate today. If another religious leader were to come and predict his own death and predict his resurrection and do it, I'll listen to him. But until then, I'm going to listen to the only person that ever said and did what they said they were going to do. Just contemplate that for a moment. You know, as you get bombarded with other things in your life, I'm going to listen to the guy who said what he was going to do, did what he said he was going to do, and followed through. And no other time has anybody ever predicted their death and their resurrection and followed through with it. So let's just keep that in mind as we go through this. Peter, after seeing that Jesus had done what he said he was going to do, changed everything. He went from believing that he was the anointed one, to meeting and living with and hearing from, and then seeing the resurrected anointed one. This changed everything, as it should for us. When we spend more time around Jesus, it should change us to the point that we go from maybe we think we're here to we realize that, maybe we're here. Maybe. Just maybe. Maybe we're just good enough to wash Jesus' feet. And that's it. But here's the good news. In the cosmic scope, the invitation to this party, the party that Jesus will host, is an open invitation. He's not going to exclude you because of who you are. You may exclude yourself because of who you are, but He will not exclude you because of who you are or what you are. Everyone is invited to attend. the reality of this is both a comfort and a challenge to us. See, the comforting part of this is that we're all invited. Yay, we're all invited. You ever find out about a party or a gathering that's happening, and you find out about it after it's already happened because the host didn't want to include you? Not such a great feeling. I'm sure that it's happened to all of us, and none of us want to really relive that or go through that again. But think about how you felt at that time when you found out something happened with a bunch of people that you think were your friends, but you weren't invited. And you know, the host will always give you one of the, "Oh, did I not send you that invitation?" And we all know that there's not a real big level of truth in that false surprise that, "Oh, you didn't get invited? I'm sorry." But this is a party that everyone's invited to. Peter was invited to receive all of the benefits of Christ. He hung out with him. He walked the earth with him. He received all these benefits, and he knew about this kingdom party that was going to happen. And he had already heard Jesus talk about what heaven was going to be like and what the benefits of walking with him were. But after Jesus rose, it became a reality to him. It no longer was it a nice thing that the good teacher said. It was everything that he ever said was true because he's standing here. We have to remember this. And Peter, who denied Jesus 3 times, then saw him alive after he saw him dead. Think about that for a moment. Does that change your perspective? About everything that Peter writes, does that change your perspective? Because a lot of the stuff that he wrote before Jesus' death is written from the viewpoint of a reporter. Jesus did this. Jesus did this. Jesus did this. Everything he writes after is how real all of the spiritual world is. We take that into perspective that Peter felt he was unworthy in his relationship with Christ after that encounter. And I think for the most part, we feel unworthy. There's some exception to why we should feel worthy. But as a general rule, I believe we should all feel very much unworthy of even receiving the invitation. See, Jesus gives us this invitation to receive forgiveness for all of the crap in our life that shouldn't allow us to be with him. And that's what Peter was delivering to Cornelius. That Jesus offers forgiveness for everything that he had done. See, humanity puts many labels. And you know, I don't want to create an exhaustive list of labels because I don't think we have time for it. But in my lifetime, I've been called unworthy, liar, thief, addict, drunk, just bad. But I shared one title that Peter shared: sinner. The reality is that God doesn't want us to carry those titles, those labels. He wants us to carry the forgiven label, the holy label, the righteous label. And the only way that we can do that is by accepting his invitation for renewal. I mean, the ultimate designation that God intended for each and every one of us is really simple. He expects me to be called son, Rebecca to be called daughter. That's the only label that God intends for us to wear. His son or his daughter. And the only way that we receive that is to invite him to take over every part of our life. You know, last week I talked about Jesus being Lord of all. That's really where it breaks down for most of us. We allow Jesus to be Lord of some. And I've heard it said that if Jesus isn't Lord of all of your life, then he's not Lord at all. Complete surrender is what God's looking for. That's what he expects from his sons and his daughters. See, we get this twisted. We feel like we have to come to the party all cleaned up and dressed up and primped up. But what God really wants is for us to come dirty and broken and beaten and hopeless and worthless, so that he can clean us up and he can make us new and worthy and righteous. See, the comfort is that everyone's included. But where we have this challenge is in the same words, that everyone is included. And see, I'm thinking through this, and I think the story of Jonah. See, Jonah went, the end of the story of Jonah is that he went and he preached to Nineveh. But think back to the beginning of the story of Jonah. Jonah didn't want to go. He didn't want to go to Nineveh. You remember why? Because he was afraid that the people of Nineveh would accept God, ask for forgiveness, and God would forgive them. He hated the people in Nineveh so much that he didn't want them to get God. See, I think the challenge here in this passage is that many of us have people in our lives that, whether we want to admit it or not, we'd just as soon not see them get it. It's a natural flesh thing that we have people that maybe we don't get along with as well as others. That's why it's a challenge. See, I believe God's calling us today to begin to walk through the process of saying, everyone on the invitation list includes the loved ones, the hated ones, and all the people in between. It's pretty hard for us to wrap ourselves around loving our enemies. As I read through this message, I processed all over again my emotions of September 11th. And I thought, remembering how I felt about the people that were being accused of attacking our country. And I thought, how hard it is to say, I sure hope they get to heaven. I sure hope they receive forgiveness. That's the challenge. The people that attack you, the people that hurt you, the people that do you wrong, the people that do you dirty, sure hope they get forgiveness. I sure hope they make it to heaven. See, I imagine that there's going to be this moment in heaven. Bear with me. There's no theological basis for what I'm about to say. I think there's going to be this moment in heaven where we just we step past the gates and we've gotten past Peter and we said, you said it was for everybody. You were right. Look, I made it. And then we get in and we go, how did you make it? And then someone comes from this side and looks at you and says, how did you make it? See, I think there's going to be that moment. Right before we enter into the eternal praise and worship, where we have the opportunity to look around and see who's there. Who got invited and who accepted. See, I'm starting to get to a point where I'm more concerned about the people that don't make it than the people that do make it. I'm more concerned of the people that I might walk past and not say what I'm supposed to say or do what I'm supposed to do that don't make it. Maybe it's you. Maybe it's somebody on the other side of that door. But I believe that we have to get to a place where we take our label, our things that we've attached to us, or that others have been so gracious to attach these nasty labels to us, that we get to a point where we can shed those labels in favor of the label that God wants to put on us. Son and daughter. Or one step further, bride. And then once we've shed that label, to look around at our fellow man, our enemy, the people that have done us wrong all of our life, and say, you're invited also. And be happy about it. See, it's one thing for us to say, well, I hope the people who attacked us on 9/11 make it to heaven, and it's another thing to pray for them and reach out to them and share the gospel with them. It's a whole different thing to take Jesus to our enemies. See, I believe something happens when we start to pray for our enemies. That they have... Well, let me give you two scenarios, because I believe both could possibly be true. One, we pray for our enemies, and they begin to get inundated with people who want them to meet Jesus in whatever way, shape, or form. And they accept that invitation. The other, which is I like better because it's just my personality, is that God begins to work on them so much that they're absolutely miserable in their secular life, that they cannot get enough of God into them as fast as possible. And I prefer that method, because that's what it took to reach me. I had to be so miserable that I would accept what God wanted for me. So the difficult prayer that I pray for loved ones is, God, make them miserable. And I don't like that prayer when I pray that for my loved ones. Well, let me tell you the prayer I pray for my enemies, the people that don't want good things to happen for me, and I sometimes don't want good things to happen for them. God, do whatever you have to. Reach them by whatever means it takes. The same that you did for me. By whatever means it takes. The reality is that there's a big party, and we're all invited. The question, will you accept your invitation?